Do my eyes deceive me, or do we finally have some good news about Destiny and Bungie? So, full on, I am still sick. I know I'm saying still. Unfortunately, I had one video planned that kind of got shelved for a little bit while I'm dealing with it, but either way, I couldn't help but address this the moment I saw it. So, published the same day this is being recorded, Sony confirms Bungie is becoming part of PlayStation Studios. The independence is getting lighter. Now, full on, something that I have started to believe and something that a good portion of the community has started to believe is that Bungie's independence was a problem because they kept making decisions that weren't good for the game and Sony was allowing it to happen. Well, possibly no longer. Sony is actually keeping up with the, I should say, community sentiment and understanding that the community, at least a good portion of it, doesn't like what Destiny has become, and hopefully Sony is actually taking efforts to, fix what Bungie possibly broke. But let's get into the article. 2 years after Sony acquired Bungie at a $3.6 billion deal, the Destiny 2 developer is slowly losing its independence it was originally promised. The deal, which closed in mid-2022, was supposed to let Bungie operate as an independent subsidiary under Sony's umbrella, but after missed revenue targets, internal struggles, and multiple rounds of layoffs, Bungie's role within the PlayStation ecosystem is changing dramatically. Over the past year and a half, several key departments at Bungie have been moved under Sony. This includes teams handling marketing, publishing, HR, legal, IT, production, and most recently, strategic partnerships. Supposedly, even Bungie's creative studios and leadership figures like former CTO Luis Villegas have transitioned into senior roles at PlayStation. Sony now says Bungie is becoming part of PlayStation Studios. The latest update comes straight from Sony itself during the company's Q1 FY 2025 earnings call earlier today. Newly appointed Chief Financial Officer Lin Tao addressed Bungie's status and confirmed that its autonomy is slowly fading. About the governance of Bungie at the time of acquisition, we were offering a very independent environment, so that was one way of thinking, Tao explained. However, we have gone through structural reform and we announced last year, so this independence is getting lighter and Bungie is shifting into a role which is becoming more part of PlayStation Studios and integrating in proceeding. In the long term, you can see this as an ongoing process, so the direction is to become part of PlayStation Studios. In simple terms, that means Bungie isn't operating fully on its own anymore. Bit by bit, the studio is being folded into the larger PlayStation organization, just like Naughty Dog, Santa Monica Studios, or Guerrilla. While no specific timeline was given, Sony clearly sees Bungie as a part of its long-term plans for first-party development, especially around live service projects. Bungie has had a rough stretch recently. Reports suggest the studio has around 1,600 employees before its October 2023 and July 2024 layoffs, and around 2 major rounds of cuts and transitions in Sony. It's believed almost half of those employees remain at 850, allegedly. In related news, Destiny 2's latest expansion, the Edge of Fate pre-orders, are reportedly down nearly 50% compared to the final shape. This follows a continued drop in player engagement and interest, adding further pressure on Bungie as it works through internal restructuring and full integration into PlayStation Studios. What do you think about Bungie losing its independence and becoming part of PlayStation Studios? Is it good for Destiny and future projects like Marathon? Let us know in the comments. Now, I'm just going to say straight off in my own video, as I say it, this is potentially a very good thing because of recent news, like even going back over some of the latest articles they talked about. Movement speed is being bugged, bandwave for cheaters, everything else. The former Bungie CEO saying not everything should be live service. Then everything in Ash and Iron, and of course that issues we talked about fairly recently about how the Plague Land should return in a certain way, but Bungie is likely to not return it in that certain way. Unfortunately, Bungie as a whole seems to have started to take shortcuts in total. Like I've mentioned in the past when it came to raid contest modes. There was, of course, plenty of bugs. However, instead of pausing it and putting it on for later, they just said, let them deal with the bugs and have an incredibly buggy contest mode. Same thing with the disabled list. There was dozens of weapons disabled that could have been very good for raid contest modes. However, because it would have been an unfair advantage. Bungie, instead of saying, hang on, let's fix these so everyone can have the guns they would want, they instead disabled and said, deal with it. There's plenty of examples of Bungie just in general taking shortcuts that is plain shown that they have priorities all over the place. Because, like I've mentioned in the past, I know I keep bringing this up like a broken record, Harbinger, Exotic Mission, was promised ages ago when the Whisper and 0 Hour missions got their reprisals. Still nowhere to be seen, never mentioned again. Raid reprisals. We have 4 raids of Destiny 1. 3 of them have been restored. Why is the last one not there? Well, probably because reinserting Siva Fallen into Destiny 2 probably isn't worth it just to restore 1 raid. However, there is 1 raid left to be restored. Just get it done already. They keep just pushing it off and potentially not doing it, and eventually Destiny might die before they even have a chance to reprise Wrath of the Machine. There's dozens of reasons that I could go over why Bungie has taken shortcuts or otherwise had off priorities in the latest day. Like perfect case right now, power. Right now, the power grind is a slog. Not really any, like, people are doing it because it's something to do. I even thought about reinstalling Destiny and just doing a power grind, not buying not buying Edge of Fate, but just buying Destiny to have something to do. But then I thought about it and it was like, no, this power grind absolutely sucks. I would be there for days, for weeks, for months, potentially working on that power grind. Just to think, in like a month, 2 months, once the next season goes on, guess what? We're getting another 100 power. But then with the next season, once Renegades goes live, guess what? That 550, it's going back down to 10. You got to go back up to 450. And in the following season, you got to go to 550. It's just tons of back and forth. Literally the definition of insanity, doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result. So, Bungie having less independence. I genuinely think it's a good idea because unfortunately, I feel like that independence was what led to things like the layoffs, the variety of art thefts that Bungie has suffered from between Destiny and Marathon. Unfortunately, their independence probably led to a lot of their problems nowadays, which, granted, there are some things they should remain dependent on, like the cost of Destiny stuff, that should be determined by Bungie. Unfortunately, that may be something that's affected. Prices may go up, as is usual when they become less independent. However, in terms of choices and design, less independence seems like a very good development, just because me and a larger portion of the Destiny community definitely agrees that Bungie has been making too many mistakes to warrant staying independent, and that Sony needs to come in and start making corrections. If it's straight up gutting Bungie's leadership and getting Pete Parsons out of there so he can't afford another 12-car garage or something like that, I'm all for it, because the Bungie leadership doesn't seem to be exactly as stable as it might have been once upon a time. And in the same respect, other things like the dev streams when they could have just done Vidocs and all these sort of things, like there's tons of small things. I could go on and on about issues, but Sony having a bigger controlling hand in Destiny is actually a potentially good thing for the future, solving a lot of Bungie's mistakes. On that note, agree or disagree, always my comments are open for this discussion as always. In the end, I honestly just think that Destiny needs some correcting. It needs a course correction, and unfortunately Bungie doesn't seem capable of causing that course correction on their own without massive community backlash. With that, my name is the Bad Scorpion, and I'll see you in the next video.